Welcome to this presentation by the Glendon Association and PsychAlive. We're going to be talking today about means matter, that when we restrict the means for suicide, particularly very lethal means, we help to prevent suicide. And the focus is going to be on how bridge barriers help prevent suicide. I'm Dr. Lisa Firestone, clinical psychologist and Director of Research and Education for the Glendon Association and Senior Editor for PsychAlive. These are the words of Kevin Hines, a survivor of his very lethal jump from the Golden Gate Bridge. I think this demonstrates that all people who die by suicide are ambivalent. And as you can see, at the last minute after he took actions to end his life, Kevin very much wanted to live. Every suicidal person is ambivalent, as Kevin was. A part of them wants to live, and a part of them wants to die. Most suicidal states are both temporary and treatable. People who are suicidal are in a state in which they are turned against themselves. They are not in their own point of view. Instead, they are listening to a vicious anti-self that can be overcome. So they're never on their own side when they take this kind of action. Reducing access to lethal means saves lives. By making lethal means less accessible, people have the chance to survive and to find the help they need. Help is available, and that's what we want to stress in this presentation today. Bridge suicides are almost 100% lethal. 100% of people who jump from the Golden Gate Bridge and survive said the moment they jumped, they immediately regretted their decision, just like Kevin. 90% of people who survive a suicide attempt never try again. So if we can prevent those suicide attempts from being lethal, we can save a lot of lives. Intent isn't all that determines whether an attempter lives or dies. Means also matter. Having access to very lethal means makes it more likely that somebody will die by suicide. Restricting the means reduces suicides by preventing the attempt or by reducing the lethality of the attempt that is made. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline calls bridge barriers the most effective means of preventing bridge suicide. When we put up barriers, we stop people from dying at that location. Studies show that safety barriers not only reduce the number of suicides at the site, but the overall suicide rate in the area tends to decline. We give the message that we care, that we don't want to let people in our community die. When bridge barriers are removed, the suicide rate tends to rise. And by restricting more lethal means, we can save lives. When people make less lethal suicide attempts, they have time to change their mind, and we have time to help them. What we know from research is that, for instance, in Bristol, England, the number of suicides reduced by almost half after bridge barriers were erected there. In Switzerland, in Bern, Switzerland, a net added to a suicide hotspot was effective in reducing the number of overall lethal suicide attempts. So research demonstrates that restricting means, particularly these very lethal means, does matter. We also know from research that in Auckland, New Zealand, removal of barriers prompted an immediate 5-fold increase in the number of bridge suicides. And when those barriers were resurrected, the suicide rate went down. In Washington, D.C., the building of a barrier on the Duke Ellington Bridge didn't cause an increase in suicides at the nearby Taft Bridge. They don't just go somewhere else. When we put up barriers, we help save lives. Here you see me standing at the barriers that were recently erected on our local Cold Springs Arch Bridge here in Santa Barbara. The Glendon Association and PsychAlive played a crucial role in the effort to erect these barriers in Santa Barbara, California, on the Cold Springs Arch Bridge, a previous suicide hotspot. Barriers went up in February 2012. It was Glendon and PsychAlive working together with the local sheriffs and also with Caltrans to get these barriers put up. Glendon and PsychAlive have supported the building of safety barriers on bridges all over the country and around the world. Bridge barriers are a critical and effective step to helping prevent suicides. In addition to supporting these efforts, Glendon and PsychAlive provide free online resources to help prevent suicide, assessment tools for assessing suicide risk, books on the subject of suicide prevention, both for professionals and for the general public, and films, again, a film for professionals and also one for the general public. Our work is to try to prevent suicide. So first of all, we want to restrict the means for suicide, but we also want to provide people with tools for getting the help they need. Given a barrier, those considering suicide are forced to pause, giving them an opportunity to rethink their predicament and seek help. This is a quote from the New York Times. And from the Executive Director, Alan Berman, of the American Association of Suicidology, if you thwart jumpers from an immediate accessible site, you will save some lives. After getting the help he needed, Kevin Hines has gone on to create a life that is meaningful to him, showing that when we do stop people from dying by suicide, they can go on to lead meaningful lives. Kevin has become a national and international speaker, actually, on the subject of suicide and suicide prevention and mental illness treatment in general. He has had the help now to deal effectively with his mental illness and to be able to live a life that is meaningful to him. He's become married, he has a close relationship with his family, and he is going on to become a psychologist himself because he wants to help other people who are in the same predicament that he was in. So here are some resources that you can get help from. First of all, we have the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. This is our national lifeline that you can call 24 hours a day when you're in crisis or when somebody you care about is in crisis. This is the 1-800-273-TALK number. Also, on our website, PsychAlive, you can get suicide prevention advice to look at whether somebody you care about is in trouble, a loved one, a friend, a colleague, and what you can do to help. At the Glendon Association website, you can get information that can be helpful for professionals in terms of preventing suicide, and also link to all of the research on the fact that means matter. And you can find out about our upcoming trainings on how to prevent suicide. And from the American Association of Suicidology, you can get information about suicide and suicide prevention, both for the individuals at risk, for friends and family, loved ones and family members, and for people who have lost someone to suicide, and for professionals who are trying to treat effectively people who are suicidal. So these are resources that you can access that can be helpful in your ongoing battle to help prevent suicide. Please join me and get interested and learn the signs and learn how to intervene so that you can help prevent suicide. If you're interested in the sources of the statistics and information that we shared with you today, they appear here, and they're with links to any of the places that you can then access those statistics directly. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I appreciate your taking the time to listen.